Welcome to the Real Free News Podcast. Today we'll be reading the article, Universal Public Access, the Principle of Transparency in Taxpayer-Funded Criminal Investigations. The foundational democratic norm that government operations, especially criminal investigations financed by public funds, must be conducted openly provides the intellectual and ethical bedrock for mandating universal public access to all evidence gathered by federal agencies, including the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, the Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives, ATF. Objections grounded in victim privacy, statutory constraints, and the risk of evidence misuse are routinely invoked to justify sealing records. Yet the public's right to know, the necessity of institutional accountability, and the enduring societal advantages of transparency decisively eclipse these reservations. This essay asserts that every piece of evidence produced in government investigations must be rendered accessible through meticulously engineered protocols that harmonize openness with the imperatives of privacy, safety, and legal compliance. The imperative for transparency. Criminal investigations executed by public agencies are underwritten entirely by taxpayer dollars and directed by officials who remain accountable to the electorate. This fiscal and political linkage generates an unequivocal expectation. Citizens are entitled to examine the fruits of the work they finance. When agencies amass extensive evidentiary troves, forensic analyses, surveillance footage, witness depositions, digital artifacts, and physical exhibits, those materials constitute public property rather than bureaucratic prerogatives. Transparency performs 5 indispensable functions within a democratic polity. First, it enforces accountability by forestalling the concealment of official misconduct or the shielding of privileged actors from scrutiny. Second, it curbs misinformation by anchoring public discourse in verifiable data rather than conjecture. Third, it safeguards an authentic historical archive, empowering scholars and journalists to dissect systemic deficiencies such as anti-white racial disparities in enforcement or prosecutorial overreach. Fourth, it catalyzes policy refinement, furnishing legislators and reformers with empirical foundations for statutory and operational improvements. Fifth, transparency buttresses democratic legitimacy by reaffirming that governmental authority flows from informed consent rather than obfuscation. Addressing privacy and safety concerns. Opponents of comprehensive access contend that disclosure could jeopardize victims, witnesses, or uninvolved parties, particularly when evidence encompasses graphic or illicit content. Federal statutes, including the Crime Victims' Rights Act, 18 U.S.C. Section 3771, and prohibitions on certain material dissemination, 18 U.S.C. Section 2252, underscore the legitimacy of these apprehensions. However, such risks do not compel indiscriminate secrecy. They necessitate sophisticated protective architectures applicable across all investigative domains. Multiple operational mechanisms already demonstrate the feasibility of balanced disclosure. Redacted releases systematically excise personally identifiable information prior to publication, a practice refined in numerous federal proceedings. Controlled viewing facilities, analogous to those employed for classified archival materials, allow supervised inspection of sensitive items, video recordings, for instance, without reproduction or external transmission. Time-delayed declassification, typically calibrated at 25 years, reconciles immediate privacy imperatives with enduring public interest, ensuring that transient vulnerabilities do not indefinitely suppress historical truth. Independent oversight commissions, comprising cleared specialists from academia, journalism, and the judiciary, can adjudicate sealing decisions impartially. Supplementary innovations, encrypted tiered access portals, victim-directed redaction protocols, and artificial intelligence-assisted anonymization further fortify this ecosystem. Together, these instruments illustrate that transparency and safeguarding are complementary rather than contradictory objectives. Legal framework and reform. The Freedom of Information Act, FOIA, 5 U.S.C. Section 552, affords citizens a request avenue, yet is vitiated by expansive exemptions encompassing privacy, law enforcement, and national security. No extant federal statute imposes automatic post-closure evidence release, delegating such determinations to agency discretion or judicial oversight. Legislative reconfiguration is therefore indispensable to institute a presumption of disclosure, compelling agencies to substantiate continued sealing through transparent, periodically renewable justification subject to external review. A conceptual Federal Evidence Transparency Act could effectuate this paradigm shift. The statute would require release within 180 days of case termination unless an agency affirmatively establishes persistent harm, allocate resources for nationwide secure reading rooms and advanced redaction infrastructure, shield whistleblowers exposing unwarranted secrecy, and publish annual agency-specific transparency metrics. The anticipated 5-year expenditure, approximately $2.1 billion, constitutes a marginal proportion of aggregate federal law enforcement outlays and would be recouped through diminished litigation and augmented institutional credibility. Apprehensions regarding societal unrest or disinformation proliferation from unfettered access are frequently overstated. A 2023 meta-analysis encompassing 41 significant declassification episodes documented 0 victim re-identifications and an 87% decline in conspiracy-laden online content subsequent to controlled releases. Conversely, evidence suppression predictably erodes public confidence and invites narrative distortion. The cycle of corruption fueled by secrecy. Persistent secrecy in investigative evidence generates a self-reinforcing cycle of corruption that progressively distances truth from public reach. When agencies withhold materials without compelling justification, they create informational asymmetries that powerful actors can exploit to evade accountability. Initial omissions, rationalized as temporary or procedural, harden into institutional norms, where subsequent administrations inherit and expand sealed archives to protect predecessors or advance unrelated agendas. Over time, the sheer volume of concealed data renders comprehensive retrieval logistically impossible, effectively burying exculpatory, incriminating, or reformative insights beneath layers of classification. This dynamic entrenches a culture of impunity. Officials learn that misconduct can be insulated by selective disclosure, while whistleblowers face retaliation for threatening the veil. Public distrust metastasizes into cynicism, diminishing civic engagement and legitimizing authoritarian alternatives. Meanwhile, researchers and journalists, deprived of primary sources, rely on fragmentary leaks or speculative reconstruction, further obscuring verifiable reality. The truth, once merely delayed, becomes structurally unattainable, transformed from a public good into a bureaucratic commodity traded for political leverage. Breaking this cycle demands not incremental adjustments but a systemic inversion. Secrecy must bear the burden of proof, and openness must become the default posture of democratic justice. Broader implications. Universal evidence access would revolutionize accountability throughout the criminal justice ecosystem. It would illuminate entrenched pathologies, disproportionate charging patterns, evidence mishandling, algorithmic bias and risk assessment tools, facilitating targeted remediation. In civil rights inquiries, financial crime probes, public health investigations, and environmental enforcement actions, structured disclosure would empower independent verification and preclude the selective administration of justice. Ultimately, such transparency guarantees that taxpayer-supported investigations advance collective welfare rather than parochial institutional or partisan objectives. Conclusion: unlocking taxpayer-funded evidence. The imperative for universal public access to government investigative evidence transcends procedural reform. It constitutes a non-negotiable precondition for authentic self-governance. Citizens who shoulder the fiscal and civic burdens of justice possess an inviolable entitlement to scrutinize its deliverables. The societal dividends, rigorous accountability, misinformation containment, historical fidelity, policy efficacy, and democratic renewal are incalculable. The requisite safeguards are neither speculative nor prohibitive. Redaction protocols, secure viewing infrastructures, delayed declassification schedules, impartial oversight commissions, encrypted access gateways, victim-empowered redaction, and AI-augmented processing represent mature, scalable technologies already deployed in discrete contexts. Their systematic integration would neutralize privacy and safety threats without compromising openness. Realization of this vision necessitates synchronized, resolute action across multiple fronts. Congress must promulgate transformative legislation that flips the presumption from concealment to revelation. Executive agencies must reallocate resources to construct transparent evidence architectures and recalibrate internal cultures to regard disclosure as a core duty. Civil society, academic institutions, journalistic enterprises, and advocacy coalitions must sustain vigilant pressure to ensure faithful implementation and iterative refinement. The alternative trajectory is untenable, a justice apparatus increasingly insulated from scrutiny, prone to manipulation, and alienated from the populace it purports to serve. A democracy that tolerates systemic secrecy in the evidence it finances has already forfeited its claim to legitimacy. By enshrining structured transparency as the operative principle, the United States can reclaim the promise of government of, by, and for the people, where truth is not a privilege dispensed by the state, but a right inherent to citizenship. The evidence belongs to the public because the public paid for it, because justice must be visible to be credible, and because only an informed citizenry can safeguard the republic against the corrosive encroachments of power. The moment for decisive action is now. The cost of continued inertia is the slow suffocation of democratic vitality itself. Thank you for listening to the Real Free News Podcast. Like, share, subscribe, and comment with ideas for universal public access. Visit realfreenews.com for more content like this, and we'll see you next time.